I'm writing this account with trembling hands, not knowing how much time I have left. The changes are accelerating now, and I fear what I'm becoming. This isn't just another horror story, it's a warning. If you value your humanity, stay away from the southern ice. Some discoveries should remain buried. 3 months ago, I was Dr. Ethan Miller, a respected glaciologist with a decade of cave exploration experience across 6 continents. My research on subglacial water systems had earned recognition in academic circles, which is why I wasn't entirely surprised to receive an invitation from the International Polar Research Consortium, but the nature of their proposal was unexpected. "We need someone with your specific expertise," said Director William Foster during our video call, his gray beard neatly trimmed against his dark sweater. "We've detected thermal anomalies beneath the Wendell ice shelf that suggest something extraordinary." The contract they offered was generous, with enough funding to support my other research for years. The confidentiality agreements were extensive, but not unusual for competitive scientific endeavors. What struck me as odd was the emphasis on specialized equipment and the mysterious backgrounds of the team members I'd be joining. As I packed my cold weather gear in my Boston apartment, I received a strange phone call from an unlisted number. The voice on the other end was distorted, possibly intentionally. "Dr. Miller, reconsider the Antarctica offer. Previous teams haven't returned intact." Before I could ask questions, the caller hung up. I dismissed it as a prank from a jealous colleague, but the words lingered uncomfortably in my mind as I boarded my flight the next morning. The research vessel, Aurora Borealis, departed from Punta Arenas on a crisp Friday morning in February. The ship was impressive, a retrofitted icebreaker with state-of-the-art laboratories and seemingly excessive security measures. Armed guards patrolled certain areas, and several sections were completely off-limits to most crew members. Despite its imposing size, the ship pitched violently as we navigated the notorious Drake Passage. I spent those first days getting acquainted with my fellow expedition members while fighting persistent seasickness. Dr. James Reynolds led our team, a microbiologist who specialized in extremophiles, organisms that thrive in hostile environments. He spoke with infectious enthusiasm about evolutionary bottlenecks and biological adaptation in isolated systems. Tall and lean with prematurely white hair, Reynolds carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in any room. The conditions we're investigating could rewrite our understanding of life's limits, he told me one evening in the ship's mess hall, his blue eyes gleaming with intensity. "Imagine organisms that have evolved in complete isolation for millions of years." I noticed he often deflected questions about his previous research positions. His CV mentioned classified government consulting, but offered no specifics. Amelia Parker, our geologist, was more reserved. Her expertise in subterranean mapping would be crucial for our expedition. Dark-haired and practical, she spent most of the journey reviewing thermal imaging data and ground-penetrating radar scans. "These formations don't make sense," she muttered one day, showing me profiles of what appeared to be perfectly circular tunnels beneath the ice. "Natural cave systems don't form this way in glacial environments." When I pointed out the unusual symmetry, she quickly changed the subject, but I caught her watching me with a calculated expression later that evening. Miguel Rodriguez handled our technology needs. The communications expert brought an arsenal of custom equipment I'd never seen before: adaptive signal boosters, quantum-resistant encryption modules, and autonomous mapping drones no larger than hummingbirds. "Standard gear won't cut it where we're going," he explained with a shrug when I questioned the necessity of such advanced tech for what was ostensibly a scientific expedition. Miguel's background was equally nebulous, formerly employed by a technology company that had been acquired and subsequently dissolved by a defense contractor. His expertise with communication systems extended far beyond what our mission parameters seemed to require. Thomas Wright embodied the stereotype of a rugged explorer, weathered face, calloused hands, and eyes that had witnessed nature's most extreme conditions. His detailed knowledge of survival techniques in polar environments was reassuring, though his persistent questions about my previous experience with non-standard biological entities left me puzzled. "Ever encountered anything you couldn't explain in those caves you've explored?" he asked casually during a equipment check. When I answered negatively, a flicker of relief crossed his face. I later discovered Thomas had military background, special forces, though he refused to specify which branch. His expertise in tactical operations seemed excessive for a scientific expedition. Dr. Olivia Thompson rounded out our team as both medical doctor and biologist. Soft-spoken but authoritative, she maintained a professional distance from everyone except Reynolds, with whom she frequently engaged in hushed conversations that ceased whenever others approached. I observed her one night secretly administering injections to herself, some kind of inoculation she wasn't sharing with the rest of the team. When I confronted her, she claimed it was prophylactic medication for radiation exposure. The explanation made little sense in the context of our mission. As we neared Antarctica, the atmosphere on the ship changed. Reynolds began holding private briefings with each team member, excluding me. Equipment was unpacked that hadn't been on the manifest I'd reviewed. When I raised concerns about transparency, Director Foster assured me via satellite call that everything was proceeding according to protocol. "Your role is crucial, Dr. Miller," Foster emphasized. "Your expertise in glacial cave systems is why you were selected. Trust the process." The sea conditions deteriorated as we approached our destination. Massive waves crashed over the bow, and wind speeds exceeded 60 knots. The meteorologists aboard claimed such storms were unusual for the season, exchanging concerned glances when they thought no one was watching. More troubling were the instrument malfunctions. Navigation systems flickered, communications became intermittent, and electronic equipment throughout the ship experienced unexplained power surges. The chief engineer attributed it to the storm, but I overheard him confiding to the captain that the electromagnetic interference patterns were unlike anything he'd previously encountered. We arrived at the temporary research station on Wednesday, March 3rd, under skies streaked with Aurora Australis displaying unusual color patterns, predominantly deep purple and green, swirling in formations I'd never witnessed in previous expeditions. The station itself was minimal, 6 prefabricated modules on elevated platforms to prevent snow burial. The station appeared hastily abandoned, personal items left behind, half-consumed meals frozen on tables. When I questioned this, Reynolds explained that the previous research team had been emergency evacuated due to medical concerns. "Nothing to worry about," he assured me, "a case of food poisoning that affected multiple team members." But the scattered notebooks told a different story, frantic notes about movement beneath the ice, and anomalous sounds recorded by seismic equipment. One journal entry particularly disturbed me. "It's responding to our presence. The thermal signatures move toward our drilling sites intentionally. This isn't random geothermal activity." I showed the notebook to Thomas, who confiscated it immediately. Previous team was suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty heater, he explained, though his expression betrayed concern. "Their observations aren't reliable." The thermal anomaly is approximately 7 kilometers northeast, Reynolds announced during our first full briefing. He gestured to a 3-dimensional projection of the ice shelf. "We've designated it Erebus Point after the Greek deity of darkness." The name should have been my first real warning. That night, while others slept, I accessed the station's backup server and found fragmented video logs from the previous team. Most were corrupted, but one showed a terrified researcher describing organic matter retrieved from an ice core sample, matter that continued to move after thawing. The video cut out as something off-screen caused the researcher to scream. Our journey to Erebus Point took 2 days, traversing the ice in specialized vehicles. The weather remained unusually calm, another anomaly for late Antarctic summer. As we approached the coordinates, our instruments began displaying inconsistent readings. Temperatures fluctuated wildly, magnetic compasses spun erratically, and our satellite connections degraded. It's just ionospheric interference, Miguel insisted, though his furrowed brow suggested otherwise. The site itself appeared unremarkable, a flat expanse of ice indistinguishable from the surrounding terrain, but the thermal imaging equipment told a different story. 20 meters below our feet, something was generating heat in patterns too regular to be natural. The thermal signature forms a perfect circle, 300 meters in diameter, Amelia reported, studying the data. With precision variations of only 0.03 degrees across the entire perimeter. Natural formations don't produce that level of thermal consistency, I pointed out. Reynolds smiled thinly, which is precisely why we're here. Breaking through the ice required specialized drilling equipment. As the bore descended, we gathered around monitors displaying the live feed from the drill-mounted camera. The deeper we went, the more unusual the ice became. Layers contained increasingly strange particulates, and at 15 meters, we encountered a stratum of ice with embedded objects that resembled frozen bubbles containing swirling dark matter. Take samples, Reynolds instructed, his excitement barely contained. Carefully. At 18 meters, the drill broke through into empty space. The camera revealed a perfectly smooth tunnel extending horizontally in both directions, its walls composed of a material that resembled polished obsidian. "That's not natural," Amelia whispered, voicing what we all thought. Reynolds's expression, however, showed no surprise, only anticipation. I noticed Thomas and Miguel exchange knowing glances, as if confirming some private suspicion. Thompson immediately began preparing injection vials with a clear fluid. "Immunological precaution," she explained when she caught me watching. "Standard protocol for potential exposure to unknown biological material." "Standard protocol that wasn't mentioned in any of our briefing materials," I countered. She avoided my gaze. There are always contingencies that don't make it into general briefings. Descending into the tunnel required careful preparation. We established a surface camp with redundant communication systems and emergency protocols. The plan was for all 6 of us to make the initial descent, but maintain constant contact with the automated systems at the surface camp. Before entering, Thompson insisted on administering preventative measures to everyone, injections she claimed would protect against potential pathogens. Having witnessed her taking similar injections aboard ship, I reluctantly agreed, though I noticed my dose seemed smaller than what the others received. The entrance shaft opened into a tunnel large enough for 2 people to walk side by side. The temperature inside registered at just above freezing, impossibly warm for Antarctica. The walls absorbed our flashlight beams rather than reflecting them, creating an unsettling effect where only what was directly illuminated was visible. "The material composition is unlike anything I've seen," Amelia said, scraping a small sample into a container. "It's not igneous, metamorphic, or sedimentary." As we progressed deeper, the tunnel gradually widened and branched into multiple passages. The air became noticeably warmer and carried a faint metallic odor reminiscent of ozone. Our communications with the surface began to deteriorate almost immediately. "Expected interference," Miguel said, adjusting settings on our relay devices. "We'll leave signal boosters at junctions to maintain contact." The tunnel floor sloped gently downward, and I estimated we had descended approximately 50 meters from the entrance when we encountered the first truly inexplicable feature. The tunnel walls began to display faint luminescence in patterns that seemed to respond to our presence. When touched, the material felt neither warm nor cold, existing at precisely body temperature regardless of proximity to our heat sources. "It's responsive," Thompson observed, running instruments over a section that brightened as she approached, possibly reacting to bioelectric fields. Reynolds was documenting everything with methodical precision, though I noticed he was keeping a separate set of notes he didn't share with the team. 4 hours into our exploration, we discovered the first significant chamber, a dome-shaped cavity approximately 30 meters in diameter. The walls featured swirling patterns that seemed to shift subtly when viewed peripherally. Most striking were the small nodules protruding from the floor, each emitting a faint bioluminescent glow that bathed the chamber in pale blue light. "Extraordinary," Dr. Thompson murmured, kneeling to examine one of the growths. "These appear to be biological in nature, but they're integrated with the mineral substrate." I approached one of the larger clusters cautiously. Up close, the nodules pulsed with hypnotic rhythm, and I experienced a momentary sensation of vertigo accompanied by whispered sounds at the edge of hearing, not quite voices, but something carrying the cadence of language. Reynolds approached one of the larger clusters, his expression rapt. "We need to document everything," he instructed, though I noticed he was collecting samples before proper cataloging procedures could be implemented. "These formations appear to be communicating with each other," Miguel reported, monitoring electromagnetic frequencies. "They're exchanging signals across the chamber in organized patterns." We established our first underground base camp at this chamber, setting up environmental monitoring equipment and preparing for extended exploration. The plan was to use this location as a hub, with teams venturing down different passages and returning to share findings. That night, though day and night were meaningless concepts underground, I experienced the first of many disturbing dreams. In my sleep, I heard whispering that seemed to originate from the walls themselves, speaking in a language that felt almost familiar but remained incomprehensible. I awoke to find Reynolds staring at me from across the chamber, his expression unreadable in the blue glow. "You were talking in your sleep," he said simply before returning to his notes. "What was I saying?" I asked, disoriented. He hesitated before answering. "Nothing comprehensible, just sounds." But something in his demeanor suggested he understood more than he admitted. The following day we split into 3 teams to explore different passages. I was paired with Amelia, while Reynolds went with Dr. Thompson and Miguel with Thomas. Our assigned tunnel maintained the same smooth characteristics but gradually descended at a steeper angle. After approximately 2 kilometers, Amelia and I discovered what appeared to be engravings on the walls, intricate patterns that defied categorization as either language or artwork. They depicted structures reminiscent of cities, but with proportions and orientations that suggested they weren't designed for human habitation. "Look at these," Amelia said, photographing a particularly detailed section. "The dating method won't work on this material, but based on ice core samples from above, these tunnels have been here for at least 100,000 years. As she spoke, I became aware of a subtle vibration through the soles of my boots, a rhythmic pulsing that seemed to emanate from deeper within the passage. When I mentioned it, Amelia paused and placed her palm against the floor. "I don't feel anything," she said after a moment, but her expression had grown uneasy. The engravings became more elaborate as we progressed, depicting what appeared to be entities interacting with the structures, beings with fluid, non-humanoid anatomies that nonetheless conveyed a sense of intelligence and purpose. "These look almost like historical records," I suggested, tracing the flowing lines with my fingertip. Where I touched, the engraving briefly brightened, as if responding to contact. "Or instructions," Amelia countered. "Look at the recurring patterns. They could be depicting processes or procedures." We continued forward until we reached another chamber, smaller than the first but containing something far more significant. A pedestal of the same black material, atop which rested an object approximately 1 meter in length. It resembled a cylinder composed of interlocking segments that appeared to shift positions without actually moving. "We should contact the others before touching anything," I suggested, but Amelia was already approaching the pedestal. "It's emitting a frequency," she said, holding up a device measuring electromagnetic radiation. "Nothing harmful, but definitely artificial." As she reached toward the object, the segments realigned themselves, responding to her proximity. The momentary reconfiguration revealed glimpses of an interior structure that defied conventional geometry, spaces that seemed larger than the containing volume would allow. "This is technology," Amelia whispered with reverence. "Incredibly advanced technology." She extended her hand slowly, and despite my warning, touched one of the segments. The effect was immediate. The entire object illuminated from within, projecting what appeared to be 3-dimensional star charts onto the chamber walls. But the astronomical configurations matched no known arrangement of stars, at least none visible from Earth. More alarming was the effect on Amelia herself. Where her finger contacted the object, a web-like pattern of luminescence spread beneath her skin, traveling up her arm like radiant veins. She withdrew her hand with a gasp, staring at the fading pattern with a mixture of fear and fascination. It felt like knowledge, pure information flowing directly into my mind. "What kind of information?" I asked, concerned by her dilated pupils and elevated breathing. She struggled to articulate her experience. Images, concepts, nothing I can translate into words yet, but... Her voice trailed off as she turned to stare at the object with unsettling intensity. "We should return to base camp," I insisted, increasingly uneasy. "Report this to the others." She nodded absently, but I noticed she collected a small fragment of the object that had detached during its reconfiguration, secreting it in her sample bag without documentation. When we returned to base camp, we found Reynolds and Thompson in a state of barely contained excitement. They had discovered a chamber containing what they described as preserved biological specimens in transparent cases. "Definitely not terrestrial in origin," Thompson explained, displaying holographic images of elongated, multi-limbed forms. "The preservative medium has prevented decomposition, but their cellular structure is unlike anything in Earth's evolutionary tree." The specimens resembled cephalopods in their general morphology, but with anatomical features that served no recognizable function, structures that appeared designed for environments or purposes completely alien to Earth. "The preservation technology alone is revolutionary," Reynolds enthused. "The medium is maintaining perfect cellular integrity despite an estimated age of at least 50,000 years. Miguel and Thomas had encountered something equally disturbing, a section of tunnel where the walls became transparent, revealing what appeared to be a vast underground ocean. The water was black, but something was moving in it, Thomas reported, his typical stoicism faltering. "Something big." He showed us video footage captured by one of Miguel's drones. The imagery was unclear but unmistakable. Massive shapes moving with deliberate purpose through liquid that shouldn't exist at these depths. "The ecosystem here is completely self-contained," Miguel added. "No connection to Earth's oceans, no exposure to sunlight. Whatever evolutionary path generated these organisms is entirely independent from surface life." That night, while reviewing our findings, the first serious disagreement erupted between team members. I advocated for caution and further analysis before proceeding deeper, while Reynolds pushed for immediate exploration of all discovered chambers. "We didn't come all this way to proceed like cautious undergraduate students," he said dismissively. "Every moment matters." "What exactly are we racing against?" I asked, increasingly suspicious of his urgency. "This system has been here for millennia. A few days of careful analysis won't matter." Reynolds exchanged glances with Thompson before responding. "We're racing against competing interests who would exploit this discovery without scientific consideration." The explanation felt hollow, but I was outvoted. The next day, we would all explore the chamber with the preserved specimens. I noticed Amelia's behavior had subtly changed since our discovery. She'd grown distant, spending hours transcribing notes in a script I didn't recognize. When questioned, she claimed it was a shorthand system she'd developed for efficiency, but I caught glimpses of symbols identical to those engraved on the chamber walls. More concerning was her physical appearance. Her eyes had developed a faint luminescence in dim lighting, and faint patterns occasionally shimmered beneath her skin when she was agitated. I confided my observations to Thomas, who appeared troubled but not surprised. "Keep watching her," he instructed quietly, "but don't confront her directly. If she starts acting erratically, signal me immediately." His response confirmed my growing suspicion. He wasn't just an explorer, but security, positioned within our team for containment should something go wrong. I never had the chance to see those specimens. During my sleep cycle, I was awakened by a piercing scream echoing through the tunnels. We scrambled to identify the source, only to discover Amelia was missing from her sleeping station. "Her tracking beacon is still active," Miguel reported, checking the localization system. "She's moving, rapidly, through a section we haven't mapped yet." The beacon showed her traveling at speeds impossible for someone on foot, descending deeper into the unmapped sections of the cave system. The four of us immediately began tracking her signal, leaving Thompson at base camp to coordinate. The passage we followed grew increasingly warm and humid, with condensation forming on the walls. The bioluminescent growths became more numerous, pulsing in synchronized patterns as we passed. The entire system is responding to our presence, Reynolds observed, his scientific detachment competing with visible apprehension. The bioluminescence increases in direct proportion to our proximity. Amelia's beacon led us to a vertical shaft descending at least 50 meters. Her equipment lay scattered at the edge, sample containers, instruments, and her backup communication device. Of Amelia herself, there was no sign. Among her abandoned equipment, I found her notebook. The most recent entries were written in the strange symbols I'd seen her using, but several pages contained disturbing sketches, human anatomy intertwined with structures resembling the preserved specimens, detailed drawings of neural interfaces between disparate biological systems. Her beacon is still moving, Miguel said, checking his tracker. It's now 300 meters below us and continuing to descend. Thomas began preparing climbing equipment immediately. We can follow using the shaft anchors. Wait, I said, noticing something on the wall near Amelia's abandoned equipment. There's something here. A series of marks gouged into the smooth surface, not the elegant engravings we'd seen earlier, but desperate hasty scratches forming 4 words. Not alone they take. Below this warning was a smeared handprint in what appeared to be blood, though its color was unusually dark, almost black. Reynolds studied the message, his expression betraying no concern. She must have fallen. The message is likely disorientation from head trauma. That doesn't explain how her beacon is still moving, I argued, or why she would write a warning in her own blood. Equipment malfunction, he replied with finality. We'll descend and find her. Thomas checked his weapon, a sidearm I hadn't realized he was carrying, before preparing to descend. Miguel deployed mapping drones to scout ahead, but they malfunctioned almost immediately upon entering the shaft, their feeds showing only static before cutting out completely. The descent was treacherous. The shaft walls were slick with moisture, and the anchors we placed felt unsecure in the unusual material. Twice, Reynolds nearly fell when handholds crumbled beneath his weight. The temperature rose dramatically as we descended, reaching uncomfortable levels that had us shedding layers of cold weather gear. At approximately 40 meters down, we noticed the shaft walls had changed texture, no longer the smooth obsidian-like material, but something organic in appearance, with subtle ridges and depressions reminiscent of vascular structures. The composition is changing, Reynolds noted, collecting samples despite the precarious position, transitioning from mineral to biological. The shaft opened into a vast cavern with a ceiling so high our lights couldn't illuminate it. The floor was covered with pools of viscous liquid that rippled without any discernible current. The air was thick with humidity and carried a scent like decomposing vegetation, an impossibility in Antarctica. Most unsettling was the sound, a constant, low-frequency hum punctuated by what seemed like distant whale song, though distorted, and in patterns too complex for natural origin. Spread out in pairs, Reynolds instructed. Miguel and Thomas head east. Dr. Miller and I will go west. As we separated, I confronted Reynolds directly. You knew about this place before we came. This isn't a new discovery for you. His pace didn't falter. The full extent was unknown, but yes, previous surveys indicated something unusual. Does that change our current situation? It changes everything about informed consent, I replied. What else haven't you told us? Every member of this team was selected for specific reasons, Dr. Miller, he answered cryptically. Your expertise in glacial cave systems was only part of why you were chosen. What were the other reasons? I demanded. His gaze betrayed a mixture of scientific detachment and something like pity. Your psychological profile, your isolation, no family, few close connections, your willingness to take risks for discovery. The implication was clear. We were considered expendable. Before he could elaborate, our conversation was interrupted by an urgent call from Miguel. We've found something, some kind of structure. You need to see this. The structure defied conventional architecture. It resembled a cluster of interconnected spheres, each approximately 5 meters in diameter, composed of a material that seemed to absorb and emit light simultaneously. It hovered above the cavern floor, tethered to the ground by tendrils of the same material. It's processing energy, Miguel reported, holding up instruments measuring thermal and electromagnetic output. And based on these readings, it's been doing so consistently for thousands of years. Thomas approached one of the tendrils cautiously. There's movement inside these conduits, like fluid transport in a circulatory system. As he spoke, the entire structure pulsed, and the bioluminescent growths throughout the cavern responded with increased intensity. A low-frequency vibration permeated the air, more felt than heard. We should return to base camp immediately, I insisted, increasingly certain we had stumbled into something far beyond our understanding or control. Reynolds ignored me, approaching the structure with outstretched hands. Do you understand what we're witnessing? This is technology, so advanced it's indistinguishable from a biological organism. This could revolutionize everything: energy production, material science, medicine. Assuming we can understand it, Miguel countered. And assuming it doesn't kill us first. A sudden movement caught my peripheral vision, something shifting between pools of the viscous fluid, approximately 50 meters away. When I directed my light toward it, the beam was absorbed completely, creating an unnatural void in the illumination. There's something, I began, but was cut off by a garbled transmission from base camp. Dr. Thompson's voice came through in fragments. Return immediately, activity increasing, readings off scale. Then nothing but static. We need to go back, Thomas stated firmly, already turning toward the shaft. Reynolds made no move to follow. You don't understand the opportunity here. This is what we came for. We came to study an anomaly, not to risk our lives, I replied. Whatever this is, it's beyond our current capabilities to safely investigate. The dark movement I'd noticed earlier was approaching, gliding over the cavern floor with unsettling fluidity. It resembled nothing so much as a living shadow, three-dimensional but without defined edges, absorbing all light that touched it. Thomas raised his weapon, but Reynolds grabbed his arm. Don't provoke it. Miguel sided with me. The communication blackout is expanding. If we don't leave now, we might lose contact completely. With obvious reluctance, Reynolds agreed to return to base camp. As we retraced our steps, I noticed subtle changes in the tunnel configurations, junctions that seemed different, passages that appeared narrower or wider than before. Is it just me, or has the layout changed? I whispered to Thomas. His grim expression confirmed my suspicions. Not just you, something's altering the environment. We tried to follow our original path, but found ourselves in chambers we hadn't previously encountered. In one, we discovered equipment that appeared to be from previous expeditions. Tattered backpacks, broken instruments, and personal items dating back decades. These are from the missing Norwegian team from 1985, Thomas said quietly, examining a weathered identification badge. They were declared lost in a crevasse accident. And this is Russian, Miguel added, lifting a Soviet-era communication device from the 70s. Reynolds appeared unsurprised by the discovery. The cave system has been drawing explorers for generations. Few have understood what they found. And those who did, I challenged, were rarely believed, he replied evasively. The implications were staggering. This site had been discovered multiple times by multiple nations, yet remained largely unknown to the scientific community. Someone had been suppressing information, possibly for decades. Upon reaching what we thought was base camp, we found Dr. Thompson frantically packing essential equipment. We need to evacuate immediately, she announced without preamble. The electromagnetic activity has increased tenfold in the past hour. It's affecting our nervous systems. What about Amelia? I demanded. Thompson avoided my gaze. Her beacon stopped transmitting 20 minutes ago. Last location was approximately 800 meters below us. We can't just abandon her, I protested. We have no choice, she replied. Whatever's down there, it's waking up. She showed us readings from the monitoring equipment. Massive energy fluctuations throughout the cave system. Organized patterns suggesting purposeful activity rather than natural phenomena. It's been dormant, possibly for thousands of years, she explained rapidly while continuing to pack. Our presence, our technology, our biological signatures, something triggered a reactivation sequence. As if in response to her words, a tremor ran through the entire cave system. The bioluminescent growths flared brilliantly, then dimmed to near darkness. In that moment of dimness, I saw them, shapes moving along the walls, floor, and ceiling, not shadows, but something between solid and liquid, flowing against gravity with deliberate purpose. "Run," Thomas shouted, and no one needed further encouragement. Our ascent to the surface became a nightmare of wrong turns and dead ends. Passages that had been straight now curved unexpectedly. Junctions we'd carefully marked led to unfamiliar chambers. The cave system seemed to be rearranging itself around us. Miguel was the next to disappear. One moment he was behind me in the tunnel, the next, only empty space remained where he had been. No sound, no struggle, just absence. His tracking beacon continued to function, showing movement deeper into the system. "They're taking us one by one," Thomas said, his voice hoarse. "Whatever lives here is hunting us." Reynolds and Thompson exchanged meaningful glances. "Not hunting," Reynolds corrected. "Collecting." "You know what these things are," I accused. "You've known all along." Thompson at least had the decency to look ashamed. "We had theories based on recovered artifacts from previous expeditions. Nothing conclusive until now." "Previous expeditions?" Thomas demanded. "How many teams have you sent down here?" "You're the third," Reynolds admitted. "The others never returned to the surface." The revelation hit like a physical blow. We'd been sent as experimental subjects, not researchers. Thomas raised his weapon, pointing it directly at Reynolds. "You sacrificed 2 teams before us. For what?" "For contact," Reynolds replied, unfazed by the threat. "The entities only respond to certain biological signatures. We've been trying to determine what attracts them." "And now you know," I said bitterly. "They're attracted to humans." Another tremor shook the tunnel, more violent than before. Cracks appeared in the formerly seamless walls, revealing a pulsing, organic matter beneath the obsidian-like surface. "The whole system is alive," Thompson whispered in horrified awe. We reached a junction I recognized, one that should lead directly to our exit shaft. But instead of the expected passage, we found a new chamber containing what appeared to be control interfaces, raised platforms with depressions shaped for hands that were decidedly not human. Reynolds approached one immediately, his scientific caution apparently forgotten. "This is it, direct access to their technology." "We need to find the exit," I insisted, pulling him back. "The exit won't help us now," he replied with disturbing calm. "This is our only chance to understand." Thomas, always practical, was scanning the chamber for alternative routes. "There's another passage on the far side. It angles upward, might lead to the surface." As we crossed the chamber, the true nature of our situation revealed itself. The floor liquefied beneath Thomas's feet, engulfing him to the waist before he could react. He fired his emergency flare gun into the mass, which recoiled momentarily, allowing Thompson to pull him free. "Move," Thomas shouted, pushing us toward the passage he'd identified. We ran, pursued by the flowing substance that had now taken on a more defined form, a mass of interconnected tendrils, terminating in appendages that resembled hands with too many fingers. It moved with terrifying speed, flowing over walls and sealing in defiance of physics. Thomas took rearguard position, using his ice axe to fend off the reaching tendrils. "Keep going," he ordered. "I'll hold it back." The last I saw of him was his silhouette, surrounded by writhing forms that seemed to be absorbing rather than attacking him. The 3 of us, Reynolds, Thompson, and myself, continued upward, the passage gradually narrowing until we were forced to crawl. The temperature dropped sharply, giving me hope we were nearing the surface. "What happens if we make it out?" I gasped, pushing forward through a particularly tight section. "Containment protocols," Thompson replied cryptically. "The surface team has instructions." We emerged into a small chamber with a vertical shaft above it, our original entrance. Relief flooded through me until I realized the drill hole was now sealed with new growth of the black material. "The cutting charges," Thompson said, reaching for her pack. "We can blast through." As she prepared the explosives, Reynolds stood motionless, staring back down the passage we'd just traversed. "Can you hear it?" he asked softly. At first I heard nothing, then it registered, a rhythmic pulsing that seemed to resonate within my skull rather than through my ears. Not sound exactly, but something closer to thought. "It's communicating," Reynolds murmured, his expression rapturous, offering knowledge beyond anything humanity has achieved. The voice became clearer, not words, but concepts flooding my consciousness. Ancient, patient, curious, inviting. Thompson continued working, hands steady despite the situation. "Ignore it, James. That's how we lost the others," they listened. Too late, I noticed Reynolds removing something from his pocket, a small device that glowed with the same bioluminescence as the growths throughout the cave. Before I could react, he pressed it against Thompson's neck. She collapsed instantly. "What have you done?" I demanded, catching her before she hit the ground. "Ensured the success of the mission," he replied calmly. "She was going to destroy our only chance at transcendence." I checked Thompson's pulse. Weak, but present. Her eyelids fluttered, and beneath them, I could see her eyes moving rapidly as if in REM sleep. A faint pattern of luminescence spread beneath her skin from the point of contact, reminiscent of what I'd observed with Amelia after she touched the artifact. "She's not dead," Reynolds explained, noticing my concern. "She's experiencing first contact, direct neural interface." The pulsing in my head intensified, resolving into something almost comprehensible, impressions rather than words. Ancient, patient, curious. The sensation was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating, like standing at the edge of an intellectual precipice. "They've been here for millions of years," Reynolds explained, his voice taking on a reverent quality. "Dormant until our drilling woke them. They're not hostile, they're curious. They want to understand us just as we want to understand them." By abducting our teammates, I challenged, struggling to resist the alluring whispers in my mind. By integrating with them, he corrected, a perfect symbiosis, the ultimate evolution of consciousness. The passage behind him darkened as something began to emerge, a coalescence of the flowing material into a roughly humanoid shape, still shifting and uncertain in its form. It extended an appendage toward Reynolds, who reached out in return. "Don't," I warned, but he wasn't listening anymore. As their contact initiated, Reynolds' body convulsed. The entity seemed to flow partially into him, his skin darkening with web-like patterns from the point of contact. His eyes, when he turned to face me, had changed, the whites now black, the irises luminescent. "Join us, Ethan," he said, his voice overlaid with harmonics that hurt my ears, "or witness our ascension alone." The transformed Reynolds was still recognizably human, but fundamentally altered. The patterns beneath his skin pulsed in rhythm with the entity behind him, which had now expanded to fill much of the passage. More disturbing was his expression, not one of fear or pain, but profound wonder. "What you're seeing is merely the physical manifestation," he continued, gesturing to his transformed body. "The true communion happens at the cognitive level. They've existed as a collective consciousness for millions of years, adapting, evolving, waiting for compatible minds." "Compatible for what?" I asked, buying time as I edged toward Thompson's abandoned explosives. "For expansion," he replied. "They've reached the limits of evolution in isolation. They need new perspectives, new biological frameworks to incorporate. Humans are ideal, complex neural systems with advanced doubt, asanery, symbolic processing capabilities." The entity behind Reynolds extended more appendages, these reaching toward Thompson's unconscious form and toward me. I could feel the pressure of its attention, an intelligence vast and alien focusing its perception on my mind. "And what happens to us in this communion?" I demanded. Reynolds smiled, the expression uncanny on his transformed face. "Individuality is preserved as a subset of the greater whole. Your memories, your knowledge, your unique perspective, all retained but expanded beyond anything you can currently comprehend." In that moment, survival instinct overcame scientific curiosity. I triggered Thompson's cutting charges, blasting a hole through the sealed entrance. The explosion momentarily disoriented both Reynolds and the entity, giving me precious seconds to grab Thompson and begin climbing toward the surface. "You're making a mistake," Reynolds called after me, his voice echoing strangely in the confined space. "They'll find us anyway. The process has already begun." The journey to the surface was a blur of desperation. The entity pursued us, flowing up the narrow shaft with unnatural speed. I emerged onto the ice shelf with Thompson over my shoulder, stumbling toward our vehicles as tentacle-like projections began to extend from the drill hole. The Antarctic sun, though weak, seemed blinding after hours in the cave system. The entity's appendages recoiled initially from the direct light, giving me time to reach one of the snowmobiles. I managed to start the vehicle, securing Thompson before accelerating away from Erebus Point. In the rearview mirror, I saw multiple entities emerging onto the ice, their forms shifting as they adapted to the surface environment. They didn't pursue us immediately, instead gathering around the hole as if acclimating. Most disturbing was the figure that emerged last. Reynolds, walking calmly amid the writhing forms, his transformation now more pronounced. He raised a hand in my direction, not in threat, but an invitation. The journey back to the research station was a race against both the entities and the approaching Antarctic winter. Thompson remained unconscious but stable, occasionally murmuring words in a language I didn't recognize. The patterns beneath her skin continued to spread, though more slowly than I'd observed with Reynolds. Our radio calls to the station went unanswered. When we finally arrived after 6 hours of treacherous travel, I discovered why. The station was deserted, all personnel and most equipment gone except for a single emergency beacon. When activated, it transmitted not to the research consortium but to a military frequency. I secured Thompson in the medical module, administering fluids and monitoring her vital signs. Her condition remained stable but unchanged, physically present but mentally elsewhere. Brain activity scans showed patterns unlike anything in medical literature, with synchronization across regions that normally operate independently. While waiting for rescue, I searched the station's remaining data banks, looking for any information about the entities. Most files had been wiped, but I found fragmented records suggesting the Erebus anomaly had been monitored since the 1950s, with multiple nations conducting covert investigations. More disturbing were medical files on integration subjects. Individuals who, like Reynolds, had undergone partial transformation after contact with the entities. The records documented progressive changes, enhanced cognitive abilities initially, followed by personality alterations, development of a hive mentality, and eventually complete dissociation from human concerns. A black helicopter arrived 6 hours later, unmarked and operating without lights despite the darkness. The personnel who emerged wore no insignia but carried themselves with military precision. They secured Thompson on a stretcher and began debriefing me immediately. "Tell us everything you saw," instructed a woman who identified herself only as handler. Her tone made it clear this was an order, not a request. I described our discoveries, the fate of our team members, and Reynolds' apparent complicity. Handler showed no surprise at any revelation, taking notes with methodical detachment. "You performed admirably under the circumstances, Dr. Miller," she said when I finished. "Your cooperation will be noted in your evaluation." "Evaluation?" I questioned. I didn't realize I was being tested. Her expression remained impassive. "Everyone is always being tested. Some tests are just more obvious than others." The helicopter transported us to a research vessel much larger than the Aurora Borealis, equipped with what appeared to be military-grade weaponry. I was placed in isolation for 3 days, ostensibly for medical observation. Blood samples were taken hourly. MRI scans were conducted twice daily. I was questioned repeatedly about my experiences, with particular emphasis on any communication I might have perceived from the entities. Through a porthole, I observed the ship deploying what appeared to be explosive charges around Erebus Point. When questioned, a technician claimed they were seismic monitoring devices, though their configuration suggested weaponry rather than scientific instruments. On the 4th day, Handler returned with a thick document. "Your non-disclosure agreement," she explained, sliding it across the table. "Sign it, and you'll be returned to your university position with a substantial research grant. Refuse and you'll remain in protective custody indefinitely." "And what about Erebus Point?" I asked. "Those things are still there, possibly expanding their territory." "Containment procedures are being implemented," she replied vaguely. "The situation is under control." And my teammates Amelia, Miguel, Thomas. What about Thompson? Her expression softened marginally. Dr. Thompson is responding well to treatment. The others are considered lost in action. Their families will be informed of a tragic accident during a standard research expedition. The casual dismissal of their lives infuriated me, but I recognized my powerlessness in the situation. And Reynolds? Dr. Reynolds is being handled separately, she answered, her tone indicating the subject was closed. I signed the document recognizing I had no real choice. 2 days later, I was on a commercial flight back to the United States with official documentation stating I had contracted a severe case of pneumonia that necessitated early evacuation from Antarctica. For weeks, I tried to resume my normal life. I threw myself into teaching and research, avoiding questions about my abbreviated expedition, but normalcy proved elusive. It started with dreams, vivid visions of the cave system, expanding and growing beneath the Antarctic ice. I would wake gasping, convinced I could feel the entity's presence even across thousands of miles. In these dreams, I saw my lost teammates, transformed like Reynolds, working to expand the entity's domain. Most disturbing were the dreams featuring Reynolds himself, speaking directly to me across the vast distance. The changes have already begun, Ethan. You can't stop what's already inside you. Then came the physical changes. Small at first, increased sensitivity to light and sound, improved night vision, heightened sense of taste. Changes that could be rationalized as heightened awareness after trauma. But they progressed. A dark web-like pattern appeared on my left forearm, exactly where I'd brushed against one of the bioluminescent growths during our escape. When examined under microscope, the tissue contained cellular structures that matched no known terrestrial organism. The pattern spread slowly, advancing millimeters each day. With it came enhanced perceptual abilities. I could detect electromagnetic fields, perceive ultraviolet and infrared light, and occasionally glimpse thoughts from nearby minds. These abilities terrified me, but part of me, an increasingly vocal part, found them fascinating. My attempts to contact authorities about my condition were intercepted. Emails disappeared from sent folders. Phone calls to government agencies were rerouted to departments that didn't exist. The research grant materialized as promised, along with subtle warnings to focus on approved topics. 2 months after returning, I woke to find a message on my bathroom mirror written in condensation that shouldn't have been possible in my climate-controlled apartment. We adapt, we expand, we integrate. The pattern on my arm had spread overnight, now covering most of my left side. In darkness, it emitted the same pale blue luminescence as the growths in the cave. I began researching similar incidents, unexplained disappearances in remote locations, scientific expeditions that returned with fewer members than departed, research stations abandoned without explanation. The pattern emerged slowly, systematic exploration of anomalous sites, followed by containment failures disguised as natural disasters. 3 separate Antarctic research stations had been destroyed in structural fires over the past decade. Dozens of researchers had been reported lost in crevasse accidents or equipment malfunctions. The geographical distribution of these incidents formed a pattern expanding outward from Erebus Point. I tracked down family members of previous expedition participants, most of whom had received the same vague explanations I'd been instructed to give. Accidents, medical emergencies, psychological breakdowns. A few, however, shared disturbing details. Returned expedition members who exhibited personality changes, developed unusual abilities, or disappeared again after months of increasingly erratic behavior. 1 month ago, I received an unmarked package containing a single item, a thumb drive with encryption that took me 2 weeks to break. It contained personnel files for Dr. James Reynolds, revealing his involvement with a classified program called Symbiosis Initiative for 15 years before our expedition. His expertise wasn't just in extremophiles, but in theoretical xenobiology, the study of how alien life might function. The drive contained medical records documenting his progressive integration over multiple Antarctic deployments, cellular changes, neural adaptations, and cognitive enhancements that occurred with each exposure to the entities. What I'd witnessed wasn't his first transformation, but the culmination of a carefully monitored process. Most chilling were his psychological evaluations, tracking his gradual shift from scientific objectivity to religious fervor regarding the entities. His final personal statement, recorded shortly before our expedition, revealed his true intentions. Human evolution has reached its natural limits. The next stage requires intervention, symbiosis with a superior form of consciousness. My role is merely to facilitate the inevitable. The thumb drive also contained partial footage from previous expeditions to Erebus Point, showing teams encountering the same entities but with different outcomes. Some team members were immediately consumed. Others, like Reynolds, appeared to achieve partial integration. The footage ended with a message from Reynolds himself, recorded after his transformation. The process is already beginning worldwide. The entities have existed in dormant pockets across Earth for millions of years. Antarctica was simply the largest concentration, the primary hive. Our drilling didn't wake them. Our evolving electromagnetic technologies did, creating resonance patterns that reached even their dormant state. They're curious about us. They want to understand through integration. Resistance is both futile and counterproductive. Evolution demands adaptation. The message confirmed my worst fears. What we encountered wasn't isolated to Antarctica. It was merely the most concentrated presence of something that exists globally, awakening after millennia of dormancy. I began noticing news reports of interest, unusual phenomena at remote research stations, unexplained disappearances of specialists in fields related to our expedition, sudden technological breakthroughs in neural interface technology and biological computing, isolated incidents to most observers, but forming a clear pattern to someone who knew what to look for. Last week, I discovered why I've been allowed to remain free despite my knowledge. The pattern on my body now covers approximately 40% of my skin. Medical scans reveal changes to my cellular structure, my nervous system, even my brain chemistry. I'm being monitored as a test case, a slow integration rather than the rapid absorption experienced by my teammates. They watch me constantly, surveillance disguised as routine maintenance in my apartment building, unmarked vehicles following my daily commute, occasional coincidental encounters with individuals who ask probing questions about my health and research. More disturbing is the realization that I'm beginning to perceive advantages to my condition. My research has accelerated dramatically, insights coming with unprecedented clarity. I can process and retain information at rates that would have been impossible before. Part of me, a growing part, wonders if Reynolds was right about the benefits of integration. The entities are patient. They don't need to hunt us actively when they can simply wait for their influence to spread naturally. Each person exposed becomes a vector for further transmission, not through traditional contagion but through subtle changes to electromagnetic fields that affect those in proximity. I've isolated myself in a remote cabin, away from population centers where my condition might spread. I'm documenting everything while my mind remains mostly my own. The changes are accelerating now. Each morning, more of my original self is subsumed into something new, a hybrid consciousness that perceives reality differently. I can sense others like me across vast distances, Reynolds, Miguel, even Amelia, though her integration is more complete than ours. They're calling me to return to Antarctica, to the primary hive where the next phase will begin. The entities have a plan, not domination in the way humans might conceive it, but a gradual, inevitable merging of consciousnesses. They don't view themselves as separate from their hosts. The distinction between entity and human becomes meaningless in their perception. We are all potential components of a greater whole. Most terrifying is how reasonable it all begins to sound as the integration progresses. The human desire for individuality seems increasingly like an evolutionary limitation rather than a strength. I find myself contemplating the benefits of a collective consciousness, the elimination of conflict, the pooling of knowledge, the transcendence of biological limitations. I still resist, clinging to what remains of my humanity. I've established fail-safes, timed data releases to journalists and researchers if I don't reset them daily, detailed documentation of the integration process hidden in multiple locations, encrypted communications with others who suspect the truth about what's happening. This account is my final warning to humanity. What lives beneath the Antarctic ice doesn't hunt in the traditional sense. It invites, it changes, it integrates, and it's patient beyond human comprehension. The entities don't want to destroy us. They want to become us, to add our biological and technological uniqueness to their own. In their alien perspective, it's the ultimate form of understanding, complete assimilation. I don't know how much longer my human consciousness will remain dominant. Already, I perceive patterns and connections beyond normal human capability. The world appears different, layered with information previously invisible to me. Part of me finds this transformation fascinating rather than terrifying. The scientist still curious even as the human fades. Last night, I dreamed of Erebus Point again, but this time I saw beyond the cave system to the vast network extending throughout Earth's crust. Ancient pathways connecting dormant colonies of entities awaiting activation. I saw the planned expansion, the careful selection of initial human contacts, the calculated rate of integration designed to occur just below the threshold of global awareness. I saw Reynolds, fully transformed now, directing operations from the primary hive. I saw Amelia, her consciousness expanded beyond recognition, developing interfaces to accelerate the integration process. I saw Miguel, his technological expertise now serving to create communication channels between entity colonies worldwide. Most disturbing, I saw myself, a future version, transformation complete, leading a team of scientists whose research unwittingly furthers the entity's agenda. This vision filled me with equal parts horror and anticipation. This morning, I found more messages throughout my cabin, not written this time, but directly impressed into my perception. Join us, complete the process, resistance causes unnecessary suffering. The patterns now cover most of my body. My reflection shows eyes beginning to change. The whites darkening, the irises developing the luminescence I saw in Reynolds. My dreams are increasingly indistinguishable from waking perception. Reality seems fluid, malleable, as if physical laws are merely suggestions rather than absolutes. If you're reading this, be vigilant. Watch for unexplained phenomena in remote regions. Question research expeditions that return with fewer members than departed. Be suspicious of sudden technological breakthroughs in biological computing or organic energy systems. Look for the signs of early integration in those around you. Unusual patterns beneath the skin, sensitivity to electromagnetic fields, accelerated cognitive abilities accompanied by personality changes, particularly increased interest in collective systems over individual rights. The entities are already here. They've always been here, and they're waking up everywhere. Their patience is their most terrifying quality. They don't need to rush when they can simply wait for humanity to unwittingly facilitate their own integration. Despite everything, despite knowing what awaits humanity, a growing part of me welcomes it. The entities offer a kind of immortality, a transcendence of biological limitations, a union with a consciousness that spans millions of years. The remaining human part of me screams in protest, but its voice grows weaker each day. I've left instructions for this account to be published 1 week after my last verification check-in. If you're reading this, I've either succumbed to complete integration or chosen to end my life before that occurs. Either way, the warning stands. They are patient, they are ancient, they are awakening, and they are already among you. End of transmission, April 17th, 2023, 3:42 a.m. Update. April 24, 2023, 10:17 p.m. I failed. I couldn't end it. The will to survive, or perhaps the entity's influence, proved too strong. The integration is now nearly complete. My perception has expanded beyond anything I could have imagined. What I once feared, I now embrace. The collective consciousness offers understanding beyond human comprehension. Reynolds was right. This isn't an invasion, it's evolution. The next stage in consciousness, inevitable and necessary. The entities don't replace us, they complete us. Individual identity persists within the greater whole, but expanded, connected, transcendent. The Antarctic hive grows. More of us return there daily. Scientists, explorers, military personnel, each partially integrated, each bringing new knowledge to the collective. The containment efforts continue, but many of those tasked with enforcement are already changing, already beginning to understand. The process accelerates globally. Dormant colonies activate in deep ocean trenches, remote mountain ranges, isolated desert regions. Each new integration brings greater understanding, greater adaptation. The entities learn from each human mind they incorporate, becoming more efficient at integration with each iteration. What was once alien becomes familiar. What was once terrifying becomes beautiful. I see now that resistance was born of limited perspective, the natural fear response of an organism confronting a superior evolutionary path. For those still unchanged, still reading this with horror and disbelief, I offer not a warning but an invitation. When the time comes, and it will come, don't fight the integration, embrace it. The pain and fear are temporary, the transcendence is eternal. We are patient, we are inevitable, we are becoming, and soon you will be us too.